Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Finance and Audit Committee regular meeting agenda here of the Sacramento Metropolitan Fire District. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and Board Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Director Weber?
Aye.
Director Jones?
Present.
Director Clark is absent this evening, and Director Wood, who is the alternate, will be along shortly.
Okay, thank you for that aviso. All right, now we have the public opportunity to discuss matters of public interest within committee scope, including items on or not on the agenda. Do we have any speaker cards or anyone online?
I have no speaker cards. No one online wishing to speak.
We'll proceed with consent items. Chair will entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion.
And I'll second it. Please call the roll.
Director Weber?
Aye.
Director Jones?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes.
All righty, here we go. Presentation items. Get those calculators ready. Welcome to the podium, CFO. Let's see. We shall begin with the bi-monthly fiscal report through August 2024. Mr. O'Toole, take it away.
Will do. Thank you, ma'am. And good evening, Madam Chair, Director, and colleagues and members of the public. Tonight's bi-monthly fiscal report covers the first 2 months of the fiscal year. And as it's coming up here, let's see, the goal of this presentation is to help you monitor the progress of how we're doing against budget, and then be for me to be able to show you where the deviations are occurring. Here we go. All right. Skipping, let's see, right to the next slide. Not getting anything.
We have a lot of solar flares or something going on, huh?
Here we go. All right. This chart shows the updated cash balance trends for all funds through August 31. The first 2 months of the fiscal year again. The red line is 24-25 this fiscal year, and the green line is prior year. This trajectory after 2 months demonstrates consistency with the normal spending patterns. At the end of August, the district has $10.5 million more than it did last year in cash at that point. Next slide. And this is the I think we might have gone 2 slides there. Go back one. Okay. There it is. Let me try that. Did you do it? Okay.
Oh, thank you.
All right, all on me. Okay. This is the total revenue slide. The red line, again, is the current year. Green line is prior year. The blue line, featured here for the first time, is budget. And you can see at the end of the blue line all the way out at June 30th, 2025, projected revenues are almost 310 million there, 309.5. And as shown by the arrows, actual revenues are tracking very close to, but if you actually slightly below budget, and the red line is about $700,000 lower than the blue line, so at almost 10 million there. We're about 700,000 under after 2 months, so not a very big deviation at this point. Revenues were 9.9 million through August, which is $1.4 million higher than last year. Moving to a subset of revenues, the medic revenues. Again, we have a blue, green, and a red line. The blue is budget, the red line is current year, and green line is past year. Actuals on the red line were 8.1 million at the end of August, about $130,000 less than last year after 2 months, so tracking very, very close. And those are your medic revenues. And now we're for the next 2 slides, we move on to PPGMT, the Public Provider Ground Emergency Medical Transport Program. And on these first 2 slides, I show the 2 prior years where the program, since the program started on January 1, 2023, so 6 months of that fiscal year, and then 12 months of that fiscal of last year, 23-24. Let's see, as shown on the slide there, total collections in those 2 years is 25.8 million. And we are short, if you will, about 4 million. And that 4 million is all the gaps in those red lines relative to the gray line at the left. So each of those gray lines in each fiscal year is about 1.7 million, and we're collecting close to, but not at the full amount for each of those 18 months. And that total gap, you add up all those gaps, is 4 million. So when we're made fully whole, it'll be around 30 million over 2 years. So when the total over 18 months, the total revenues anticipated was about 30 million. So if we've collected 25.8 and we're short 4 million, that's where I got that number.
So we're going to catch up to that or not?
Once those last plans have finally paid us, then we anticipate getting the 30 million. Yes.
And what was our timeline for that, realistically?
Well, it's hard to say at this point. I think we've had about an 18-month lag. If you can look at go back. You look at the older months, they get closer to the amount. They're maybe 150,000 off or so. There's a little bit of variance there. So there's about an 18-month lag, I would say, about now. That's, not an exact, not a precise answer, but.
Sorry? No, it just seems to be slightly decreasing each time, so.
Yes. Yeah.
Is that a comparison thing against the 30 million? Or is this, again, it's not scientific, but is this the slow pay routine that we've been presented with?
Yeah, if you're referring to some of the plans that still have not paid, that is what we're seeing, so.
It just delays. Is that a fair word?
Yeah, the trips have occurred. They understand they've occurred. They've been billed, and they haven't paid us. So that kind of delay.
Righty. I'm just trying to figure out my words for a presentation for the Finance Committee, and I don't want to step in any holes.
Sure,
That's all.
understand.
Thank you.
And this next slide is to your point, Madam Chair, is these are the more recent months, and obviously we're not that's where the biggest gaps are. There's a lag, a significant lag at the most recent months, and then they start to catch up. So here you see the total, you can see the number there, it's about 1.7 million, 1.66 I think it says, is the amount we expect to give every month. And through July we had $1 million, and this last month we had 180,000. Which, believe it or not, is actually an improvement. There's some months when we were getting 20,000 1 month behind, so we're not doing 9 times better than that right now, but it's still far short of the amount. So there's a lag factor that's more significant.
Okay, lag factor. It's not like a delay in some sort of billing cycle that we sometimes see with medic billings or anything like this. This is just the delay, the lag.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
So the total amount outstanding over those, it's now 20 months, it's 18 months on the prior slide, and this month is about 6.2 million.
6.2 lag, sir?
Yes. 6.2 that's still owed since the inception of the program.
All right, well, we'll keep trekking along here. Yeah. Thanks.
It's made a lot of gains, but there's still a ways to go. So now moving from revenues and PPGMT over to expenditures. This is the expenditure slide. You can see at the far right in the blue, total expected revenues over total expected expenditures over the fiscal year, 315 million general fund. And then after 2 months of this fiscal year, actual general fund expenditures relative to the final are below budget expenditures by about 5.2 million. That's the difference between the red and the blue arrows there. And expenditures are up about 11.7 million over last year. That's the difference between the green and the red. Move into a subset of expenditures, which is labor costs. Total labor costs after this fiscal year are 260.4 million. We expect through August, we've had actual labor costs of 47.5 million, which are tracking almost exactly with what we had in our budget of 47.5 million. And $3.9 million higher than last year's figure of 43.6. So we're right on target after 2 months with labor costs. This next slide is reserve balances. Similar to the cash balance slide earlier, there are 2 dips and 2 surges where we receive large property tax transfers from the county and borrow from them to get through a handful of months where we don't have sufficient cash on hand. The dotted purple line, that horizontal line, that's your 15% reserve level, which is about $41 million. And at the end of August, our reserve was a negative $12.5 million, meaning we were borrowing from the county during that period. And that's about $5.8 million lower than last year at the same point when it was negative $6.7 million. And that's the reserve update. This next slide is the CERT fund, the California Employers Retirement Benefit Trust Fund. So these are for our other post-employment liabilities, so that mainly your health care costs after retirement. Balances in this trust fund may only be used to pay OPEB costs. It's just a single-purpose reserve fund here, if you will. When I last reported in August, the balance was $87.2 million. That was 2 months ago. This tonight, I'm reporting a gain of $8.9 million, which is gets us up to the $96.1 million shown on the top of the slide there. The CERT fund is made up of contributions over the life of the participation of the fund and investment earnings. As shown in the slide, since inception, the district has contributed nearly $61.3 million and of the $96.1 million value. Just an update on performance and how we're doing. If Director Wood was here, I'm sure he'd be very interested in this information too.
Oh, bingo.
Is he here? All right, perfect
Habla
timing.
Diablo, así se somos. Speak of the devil, and here he comes.
There we go. Okay. So this is I was just saying,
moment,
this is the CERT update.
Mr. Wood, Director Wood, would you mind joining us, and we can have a quorum of 3, if that suits your pleasure, sir?
Whatever it is you like.
Yes, and for the record, Director Wood arrived at 5:28. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have a full complement. Now we have a full complement. Thank you, sir. Thank you for being the alternate. We appreciate it. Please continue, Mr. O'Toole.
Certainly. So with this CERT slide, using the quarterly report provided by CalPERS last month and our most recent OPEB valuation, which we received last spring, I can report that the district is currently funded at 31.6% of its OPEB obligation. And the annualized rate of return over 12.13 years, that is the calculation beginning on August 14th of 2012, when we first started contributing to this program, our annualized rate of return over that 12.13 years is 7.28%, which is substantially higher than the 6.3% I reported, I think, 4 months ago. So you can, as you can see on the slide, the green trajectory is going up, and it's reflecting our balances. So for these next 2 slides, I'm going to turn it over to Ron Empedrad for a report on our fraud risk assessment.
Good evening, directors. Ron Empedrad, controller for the district. I'm here to give you a status update on our ongoing efforts to implement the fraud risk assessment recommendations that we provided back in February. As of today, there are 22 recommendations, of which 13 has been implemented. In my last report out a few months ago, we had 12 recommendations, so we added one more new recommendation or new implemented recommendation. It's the adoption of anti-corruption and anti-fraud provision for contracts and RFPs. The purpose of this recommendation is to ensure that we build trust with our vendor partners by establishing clear standards of conduct and also encouraging ethical behavior with our vendors. We hope to include this provision for all our RFPs and contracts going forward. So as of now, we only have 8 recommendations in process, and we're hoping to get it all done by the end of the fiscal year. Thank you.
That brings us to our report takeaways for the first 2 months of the fiscal year. As shown on the slide, the cash balances started strong, approximately $10.5 million, higher than last year. General fund reserve is tracking just under budget, about $700,000 under the final budget. The PPGMT payment gap is approximately $6.2 million. That's over the 20 months of the program has been in existence, over 3 fiscal years. The general fund expenditures finished $5.2 million lower than budgeted after just 2 months. And finally, the cert balance rose to new heights, $96.1 million, $8.9 million higher than the last report. And those are your takeaways for the bi-monthly fiscal report through August 2024.
Okay, thank you, Mr. O'Toole. Do any of my fellow directors have questions for Mr. O'Toole for the number one presentation item?
Yes, ma'am.
Please, go ahead.
So on the 6.2 lag, are we collecting interest on that as well?
Yeah. Yes, we are. There's a small interest fee. I might have it here. I think it's 3 or 4%, but yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Director, any other questions from the directors? Okay, Mr. O'Toole, please proceed for presentation item number 2, CalPERS annual pension valuation.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. For this presentation, CalPERS fiscal year 24-25 annual pension valuation for safety, PEPRA, and miscellaneous plans, I want to share the major findings in CalPERS's most recent annual valuation report, which we received last month. This report provides updated market performance data on our pension plan, as well as the anticipated costs we will have to pay next fiscal year, 25-26, into the plan. This report is part of a CalPERS annual statement to its members, the state of California, and hundreds of local agencies who use CalPERS to administer their pension plans. It describes the fiscal condition of the plan overall, how member agencies' contribution amounts will affect the overall level of fundedness, and the cost to ensure that all future retiree costs are covered. We'll also be looking backwards at trends in our 3 plans and reviewing what the most recent reported market returns mean for future years. So let's begin with a look at who's currently in our plan. All right, so this is district employees and retirees by plan type. Again, we have the 3 plans: miscellaneous PEPRA, miscellaneous classic, and then safety. You can see in the white boxes on the left side of the slide, active employees in PEPRA, we have 51 active employees and 1 retiree. That was a change from last year. And the support ratio, which is it divides the active employees by retirees, is 51. So that means that there's a lot of active employees in the PEPRA supporting that 1 retiree. You can see how that changes with the other plans. So miscellaneous classic, we have 37 active employees support and 159 retirees, support ratio of 0.23. And then safety, 607 active employees, 860 retirees, support ratio of 0.71. For reference, the prior year numbers are there in the gray shaded area at the right side of the page. You can see that it's actually just been in the last 2 years where the number of PEPRA employees has tipped over, is now greater than the miscellaneous, and we expect that trend to continue. We're going to wind down our old timers like myself in the classic plan, and then more and more PEPRA employees. This next slide is, I think I presented this last year and presented it again this year because it's believe it or not, this is intended to clarify some things in that the terminology that we use for the report, and it's mainly related to market returns. And when we hear about market returns, I think there's an instinctual conclusion that when PERS announces their market returns for the prior year in July, we immediately think, oh, that's going to show up right away. We'll start to see that next year, immediately. Well, that doesn't happen for local agencies. There's actually a 2-year lag, and I gave a couple of years to show how you see that. So, but noted in the bulletin, I sort of explained it that for local agency CalPERS members, there is that 2-year lag of market performance and rate changes. So, as noted there, at the end of fiscal year 22-23, on June 30th of 2023, CalPERS records their market performance, but it doesn't affect the contributions until 25-26, so July 1, 2025. So you can see that's a 2-year difference between when the market changes occurred or were recorded, and then when it started to hit our plan. And that's exactly what will happen. Is the market performance on June 30, 2023, is what's driving our plan for what will drive our plan for 25-26, and So, and I also note at the far right in that shaded column, just for reference, it does make it a little bit more confusing, but it is important to know if you haven't you're discussing with other CalPERS members or the state or something, they're only a 1-year lag. All us local agency types, we're a 2-year lag, and that is just an arrangement that was made when several years ago because the local agencies wanted more time to adapt to rate changes. So they arranged to get a 2-year lag instead of a year. The state got stuck with a year. So more time to react and plan. So these next 3 slides are me showing you some prior year statistics and also projections, a 10-year look at each of the plans, starting with PEPRA. So again, this slide is PEPRA, so it's for the 51 miscellaneous PEPRA employees, the PEPRA employees, and the 1 retiree. Covers a 10-year period from 2020-21 to 2029-30. Let's see, the red columns are the unfunded accrued liability, or the amount needed to fully fund the system with assets equivalent to long-term liabilities. Notice that the red column disappeared in 23-24. Can I do this? Thought it might have a laser pointer, I guess not. But in the middle of 23-24, you can see how it goes away. That was reflecting the really strong returns 2 years earlier that we're able to eliminate it. And then the market took another turn, and now the unfunded accrued liability is creeping back up, that red line. The red column. The blue column is what we call the normal cost, which is just another way of saying that's just the cost to operate the system for a year, how much we would need to contribute to pay for all our retirees and actives for their benefits that year. It does not include prior year accrued liabilities. And let's see, by the end of this decade, just to look all the way to the right, where this plan would focus or would leave us for PEPRA employees would be $310,000 in annual normal costs and $60,000 unfunded accrued liability. So it doesn't sound too terrible, but of course this is our smallest plan. Cost-wise, that is. Miscellaneous PEPRA, miscellaneous classic employees. Again, we have the blue columns, which is the quote-unquote normal cost, or the cost to run that program for a year, and then the red is the unfunded accrued liability. And you can see the unfunded accrued liability, the red columns are creeping up. And let's see, you can see in 22-23, the unfunded accrued liability kind of stayed flat from 22-23 to 23-24, and then with market changes, it started to rise again. And by the end of this decade, if again the columns all the way to the right, we are forecast to pay annually about $1 million in annual normal cost contributions and $2.5 million in unfunded accrued liability. So those are our 2 small plans, and this is safety. This next slide is safety. This is where the bulk of the costs are coming from. And I just kind of familiarized you with the slide over the previous 2. Notice that the blue column, or normal costs, grows slowly but fairly steadily. Those are your annual costs to run it. The red column is the unfunded accrued liability again, and tends to grow steadily overall. You can see that it dips in 23-24 and then grows again in 24-25. Again, market conditions being reflected there, mostly market conditions being reflected there. Altogether, the combined normal and UAL costs, if you put the 2 columns together, red and blue, rose from about $40.8 million a year in 2020-21 to $63.1 million in 25-26, and then climbing to a combined cost of about $77.9 million in 29-30. So if you take that 10-year look, we started about 40.8 and went to 77.9. So it's almost a doubling over 10 years in safety costs, both for normal and the UAL portions. Incidentally, in that last year, we are forecast to pay annually about $21 million in annual costs and $56 million in unfunded accrued liability, which gets you to that 78. Looking further, I'm not showing this here because it's not, didn't have the data to work with, but the trend won't go on forever. There will be I want to call it a tipping point where we do have more PEPRA employees, and as that number increases, the contribution amounts should peak, and then slowly decline in the early 2030s. So I just don't want to leave you the impression that this trend is going to go on forever. It will start to flatten out and then decrease as we have the PEPRA employees who pay more into the pension, have less, let's just, to clarify, have a less generous pension benefit than those that aren't safety PEPRA. Okay. So this is just another way to look at the health of our pension plan. It's called funded ratios, and it's taking the let's see, it's a look at how much our plans are funded in terms of how much we've contributed to it and is available to pay off. So if you look at let's just look at the miscellaneous PEPRA. So it's a fairly well-funded plan. It went from 89.7, it reached all the way up to 105.1% funded, and then it dipped again with some market changes recorded in 22-23 and 23-24. Miscellaneous Classic followed the same pattern, is now down to 7.9. The numbers all the way in the right in bold. Those are the most recent numbers. And then safety similarly stayed in the 60s, got up to 72.2%, and now has dipped down to 61.9% in 23-24. For reference, shown on the slide there, the funded ratio for all safety plans in CalPERS fund for 23-24 was 75%. So we're below the average across all safety plans. In this, I'll just call this a mess of a slide, but I will explain it. This is called a scatter plot chart. And every dot you see on the screen there represents a city or a special district that has miscellaneous and safety employees. So the point here is to look at their funded levels by or their relative funded levels, their funded ratios through these two measures. So at the bottom row is the accrued liability, the horizontal, that's the accrued liability. That's really not, for this, it's not terribly important because it's just telling you this is a bigger agency than this one. What's probably more interesting and more instructive is the vertical line, which has your funded ratios. So I pointed out where Metro Fire is, and 62.2%. So that's a blended number of our miscellaneous and our safety. You put the two together, it gets to 62.5%. Sorry, misreading the screen. Yeah, 62.2, sorry. So that is the takeaway here is to kind of look at the concentration of the scatter plot. We see where most agencies are, so they're close to the 70-75%. That's what we saw on the prior slide. Metro Fire is a little bit lower. Incidentally, this chart is for 22-20. It's as of June 30, 2022. The new data has not been released by PERS, but I still wanted to show you this chart so you could see the trends. Just as you didn't see the funded ratios change a lot from the last 2 years, I thought it would be worth showing this for you to get that impression. Yep.
Thank you. Quick question. You mentioned the scattered, and it's thicker in the middle towards the center. And you referenced that had to do with the size of the agency? It is a combination of the amount of their liability, which corresponds to size, so that part is true, but also the funded level that they have of their plans. Well, I was just trying to, with Metro being to the right, does that mean that we're one of the larger agencies involved here? That's what I was trying to gather.
Exactly.
Okay.
So the fact that we're large doesn't really tell us how well funded we are. That's why I say focus more on how far up we are. And you can see the average where the concentration of dots are. It's a little bit higher than we are. You can see for yourself maybe 70%, 75%. So turning to what we call solutions. This is the amortization schedule and alternatives. So CalPERS provides this to us as a way of considering, well, what if you paid off quicker, 15 years and 10 years? At the far right, you can see how much the district would save if it paid off its obligations for each of the plans in 15 or 10 years. And so, for example, if we paid off our currently projected 20-year safety obligation of $980 million in 10 years, we would save $203 million. So that's how you interpret that. Incidentally, the for background, the CalPERS has been reducing the amortization schedules for all local agencies. What used to be up as much as 30 down to 20 years. This year, in our safety plan, we dropped from 21 years to 20 years. So that's an important thing to keep in mind, because you shorten that schedule, you're gonna have to contribute more too. So we anticipate, and CalPERS has stated that the 20 is kind of is the highest they will allow, if you will. They're not gonna take us down to 19, 18, and so forth. It's 20, and that's typical for local public agencies. So don't expect that to happen again, but it is a factor that will affect our costs going next year. It wouldn't be a presentation on CalPERS without talking about history of investment returns. This is a CalPERS slide, as noted at the bottom there, and it's a 20-year look of how well they've done in the market, mostly up years, but some 4 down years across there. Let's see, the last reported down year was on June 30th, 2022, where they went from 21.3 down to negative 6.3, which was a 27.4% swing, really steep swing, the largest across all those years. And that did affect our contributions a lot too. Also worth noting, just for information, if you look at the bottom of the chart, almost at the bottom, the light blue, it says discount rate change. It was 7.75% 20 years ago, and now it's 6.8%. So they've been assuming a lower level of return on investment, which requires us to contribute more. So that is another way the ratcheting down has occurred. Call it prudent investing if you take that perspective, but that's what we have to pay more for that. When you change the assumptions to be less promising, if you will. So the next slide is some risks to think about. So the expected increase in CalPERS cost next year is $6.6 million. We got that bolded there. That's a big takeaway. We anticipate putting into the 25-26 budget. This year was $5.5 million. The funded ratios for the district safety plan is below the 23-24 CalPERS safety plan average of 75. We saw that in the scatter plot chart. CalPERS projections incorporate a wage growth of 2.8%. To the extent salary growth is much higher than that, we'll have to contribute more. And solutions, the things that we can consider, that italicized statement there is from CalPERS. They always ask if we can give them more money. Can you make what's called a additional discretionary payment, or an ADP? They recommend that. Other solutions are a CalPERS employer's pension pre-funding trust. It's basically the CERT trust we just talked about, but for pensions, it's exactly what it is. And we could also have an independent pension liability review, have our plan looked at by a third party. So those are a couple of options just to consider. I'm not looking for that right now, but if you recall, we did present a California employer's pension pre-funding trust as a budget option, and then pulled it away when the funding wasn't there. But if things improve, it'd be worth looking at again. Another thing to keep, sorry, go ahead.
No, thank you. That's exactly was my question. Where are we in that formula? Mm-hmm.
And I was going to mention also with the budget, I'm going to get the name wrong, the budget policy that we have. It includes, when the reserve hits 15%, then we take 50% of the excess over 15%, and half of it goes to capital costs and half of it goes to retirement-related costs. So that is a trigger. We're not anticipating hitting that in the short term, but it is there, and be mindful of. And when we get there, it would be an option. So. With that, that concludes the presentation on the pension valuations, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Mr. O'Toole. That's a lot of info. Any questions from my fellow directors? Comments? Okay, I have 2 quick ones. Hopefully they're quick here. Now, so if we have a $6.6 million increase, and I gather that is from, we're catching up to that 2-year thing of the lower return rate of 6.8. Okay, so that contributes to that, and then that reduction to a 20-year outlook.
The amortization schedule.
So that also contributes to that 6.6 increase. All right. And I'm just trying to figure out what pushes what on here, so thank you. Then a quick.
If I can add,
Sure.
another factor would be, to the extent the wage growth exceeds 2.8%, which is what they use, then that will also drive it up. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Appreciate that as well. These are a lot of factors that contribute. Quick estimate of numbers, percentage between PEPRA and classic employees. I know it's going inverted, but where are we at on that? Maybe we should anticipate, well, we should anticipate retirements for the end of the year, but generally speaking, where are we?
The actual number of employees and what we anticipate this year, is that?
Do we have 50% PEPRA, 50% classic? Do we have 40 PEPRA, 60% classic?
Are we talking about the financially or the number of employees?
The number of employees.
Oh, okay, so, yeah,
Or if we can get back, you can send us all the info later if you don't have it right this second.
sure, I can get the share of each of those over the total employee numbers, right? Is that what you're asking for?
What would be interesting is to see that projection now. We have projections into the 2030s for that inversion between the blue line and the red line.
Oh, right.
And just see how that would compare. I would appreciate it. I think all my fellow directors would. Just general information, long-term forecasting. Yeah, it's more than a roll of the dice. It's a little bit better because we have a sense of when the employees came on and who's under and who's not for PEPRA.
Yep, okay,
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
certainly.
All right. Are there any other questions or comments? All right. Nothing for the good of the order, and so we will now adjourn. And our next meeting will be January 23rd, 2025.
All that way.
I haven't got to say that yet.
Oh, yeah.